but because all the world is in a hurry. I think all the anti-imperialist world is in a hurry, and then we have news a lot every day. And I think in English we must touch each day more, and then we have total confidence in you. You are loyal to the cause. You are loyal to the anti-imperialism world. You are loyal to the anti-Zionism world, and you are loyal to humanity. And you are Irish, Irish in the right side of the story, of the history.
I agree. I think it's important to have Irish voices out there because of our resistance for 800 years, which is ongoing and continues. I think people emotionally engage with that, and then when you tie it in with Palestine and Iran and everything else, even the rise of fascism, it's all there.
And at the same time, all the dots are connected. And then I think one of the priority problems, prior problems we have is that nobody connect the dots. And then they think about the Palestine cause, about the Cuban cause, about the Ukraine cause, and they don't connect. It's the same enemy, the same period. And if they are doing this, we save a lot of time in trying to explain everything. Okay, well, then today for my side, there is two questions I want to touch in briefly, but important. One is in your country, is the programs that are happening now. The event of programs is not only in your country, it's all around Europe in some time or another. In Spain, there were some program also, maybe 1 year ago or less, because there is an extreme right wing that is trying to take profit of this crisis, crisis for the living of the people, crisis for the day life of the people. But at the same time, there is an exacerbation, I think, because of the war is right there. The war in Europe is right there, I think. And this is because of the United States, the owner of the empire, from my point of view, is losing the war in Iran and in Palestine in some way, and Lebanon in some way, and in this region of the world.
No, that's good. I'll start with the first one, which is really the rise of the right across Europe.
Okay.
Okay, well, look, here's my take on all this, right? There's several different strands, so it's not just one thing. We could start off by saying that many of the Western political class are failed, they're compromised, they're corrupted. We have really corporations now running governments and not politicians, individuals, and elected representatives of the people. So when you look at North America, you see the money that goes into the elections. You see the deselection recently of Thomas Massey, a man of integrity, a man of morality, a man of plurality in some respects, someone who saw that the world should maybe be a safer place for everyone, maybe someone who was against this kind of corporate takeover and indeed the Zionist lobby takeover of American politics. So I'm going to try and spread it out over the different sectors that I see are coalescing around this rise of the right. So we've always had a right in Ireland. In fact, if I go back to the Spanish Civil War, we had members of the Irish Republican Army who joined to defend the Spanish Republic. But we also had what were called the Blue Shirts in Ireland, who joined with Franco and the fascists in order to promote that whole nationalistic kind of racism and fascism and supremacism that bore fruit with the Nazi nationalist socialist propaganda during the Second World War. So there's always been a right in Ireland. But what we're happening to see now is, Some people claim the rise of fascism, and it would be correct. It's because the capitalist system is failing. Now, it's failing because the capitalist system survives by giving working class people just enough to get them through to the next paycheck, gives them just enough to be able to pay rent, just enough to maybe be able to buy a small house with a large mortgage. So long as there's jobs, some form of a social, how would you describe that? You know, the catch-all, so that there is unemployment benefit, there is a small version of free healthcare, education's free to a certain age. I mean, education in Britain used to be free all the way up to, through and including university, but now people are getting into debt, £50,000, 50,000 euros in debt to complete their university courses and degrees and masters. So the failure of the capitalist system, where greed takes over from their necessarily making sure that working people had enough, that they wouldn't rise up in rebellion against the people who are basically using their labour in order to create gross profits for themselves. I mean, people like Elon Musk, he couldn't spend what he has in like 8,000 lifetimes. 8 million lifetimes. It's just incredible the wealth that is being taken from the working class up, squeezed through the middle class and up onto this 1% echelon in society that is basically robbing the rest of us blind. Homelessness in Ireland is at a huge, huge, huge peak. I've never seen anything like it on my life. And along with the homelessness, we have drug addiction and we have alcoholism, and the majority of the people who are homeless seem to be anywhere between 17 and 30. Now, there are older people out there who fall, through the traps that are meant to keep people off the streets, to keep people safe, to keep people secure. But between the drugs, the alcohol, the homelessness, the breakdown of community cohesion, turning people into consumer bots and breaking down communities seems to be part of this. From Thatcher and Reagan, they started this neoliberal austerity. They started this, I'm all right, Jack, so long as you have a job, you have a car, you can go on holiday, so long as your personal circumstances are okay, forget about everyone else, just be concerned about yourself and your family. So there's a breakdown in community. There's a breakdown in social cohesion. There is this malfeasance in public service by the people at the top who aren't representing the people but are representing corporations and companies. So on one level, the rise of fascism can be seen as a response to the failures of the state to provide educational positions in school, social housing for people who need social housing, jobs and opportunities for all the citizens of the nation. Now, this is outside of the boom-bust capitalist system. Even the Bible talked about, 7 years of lean and 7 years of fat. So you've got the boom-bust of the capitalist system. But when you add into that the state no longer cares for its citizens, and you have the working poor, you have more people forced into poverty. When you look at America, the biggest GDP in the world, like hundreds of thousands of people homeless, people going from paycheck to paycheck, people being thrown out of their homes because they no longer afford the rental payments or the mortgages, as landlords and corporations and venture capitalists force up the price of accommodation for people to live in cities, towns and villages. So we have the failure of the capitalist system, and that creates division among the working class. There's a classic meme that shows three people around a table, and one's a banker and two are workers, and the banker has 9 biscuits on his plate, and he says to one of the workers, pointing at the single biscuit that's left on the plate, that the other worker or the immigrant is trying to steal your biscuit. So that's the society that we're living in. Now, there are more strands to this. I've witnessed in the last 10 years the rise of what I would call American evangelicalism in Ireland. and here in the north. So there's actually a big sign on the Belfast mountains I saw today. Someone has written up Jesus with a cross on the Belfast hills. And this is seen by hundreds of thousands of people going up and down the motorway and going to and from work and hospital appointments and schools and shopping and work. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to promote the crusader aspect of Christianity. So this isn't about saving souls. This isn't about God. This is about white Anglo-Saxon supremacy. So I genuinely believe that there is a push now through Zionism, through Jewish supremacist ideology, and through financing, that some people are paid to push this Christian crusader identity to the fore of public opinion and in the public discourse. And what they're saying is, our enemies aren't demons, they're not the devil, it's not bad government, our enemies are the immigrants. They are talking about the theory of replacement through displacement. So they're pushing a narrative that the real enemies of white Europeans are people of colour and Muslims that are coming from different parts of the world. So while any white European can come to Belfast and get a job, live in a working class area and not have any repercussions around that, if you're a Muslim, if you're a foreigner, if English isn't your first language, you are a hostage to the machinations of politicians and the corruption and the manipulation of the political class, but also these influencers, these people in society who are being paid and are being encouraged and are being financed to break apart the social cohesion that has kept people together for so many years. So while I will get round to talking about what's happened here recently in Belfast, I just want to point out that people like Steve Bannon have been to Ireland. Make Ireland great again. This man's travelled across Europe. This is this right-wing, conservative kind of social impact that these people have, that it's, bring Ireland back to the glory days of the 1950s. Not that Ireland's ever seen any glory days. We've just seen occupation. And then the outworkings of that, with the destroyed economy and trying to build up a nation state. But we have what I believe is a convergence of fascism. So people who believe in the white supremacist ideology, then that is being combined to a religious orthodoxy, a religious right that believes in biblical prophecy and the end of times. They're bringing these two together with politics and money, and then a little sprinkling of, you can't get a council house because all these immigrants are coming here. Then the immigrants are all illegal. Then the immigrants are all violent jihadists who are going to take over the country. We're all going to live under Sharia law. So there's a whole political polemic being driven out there where your enemy is the coloured person and the Muslim. I think this is being driven also by the Zionist agenda. I believe that they want a war between Christianity and Islam, that they want to sit back and watch the Christian West and the Islamic East fight each other, to have hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions of people die in a huge world conflict, at the end of which the Zionist Jewish supremacists will come out from the bunkers as the inheritors of the earth, and that these people who already have huge influence around the world in governments and financial institutions and corporations will somehow be the new chosen people, the new masters of the universe, the people who will ultimately control the new world order. So I believe then that this combination of a far right who used to be anti-Semitic, who used to hate the Jews, and many still do, are now focusing on Islam. They're now focusing on the people of colour and immigration. I mean, when you see ICE in North America, what they're doing, trailing people out of cars, people out of their jobs, arresting people dropping off their kids to the preschool and schools and daycare. And they're building and have built huge concentration camps across America. This is the classic, you know, when they came for the Jews, I didn't do anything, I'm not Jewish. So when they're coming from the Mexicans, they're coming for the Haitians, they're coming for Iran, they're coming for Lebanon, they're coming for Palestine, you know, they're coming for Sudan and Somalia and Yemen. And it's this whole philosophy of if we as individuals stand idly by, then evil will flourish. And that's what we're witnessing. So a combination of separate interests that have converged around one Islamophobic agenda. So what we had in Belfast was we had a Sudanese asylum seeker who arrived in the north of Ireland via Dublin, claimed asylum, went through the asylum process and was granted a visa to live in the United Kingdom for 5 years. So the story was, and the video is, he attacked another person. They're both in the street. He has a serrated blade. He stabbed this gentleman in the left eye and he's now blind. And he tried to stab him in the right eye. And there were question marks over whether or not he was trying to cut this man's throat. So it's portrayed as a Muslim, as an Islamist, as a jihadi cutthroat murderer walking the streets of Belfast. This could have happened to anyone at any time, and that we need these people out in order to protect our women and children. So everything must be seen in context, and I'm prepared to be corrected over what I'm about to say next. But there seems to be information that these two gentlemen knew each other, that these two gentlemen might have been on the same premises, that they had a fight that spilled out over onto the street, and that one person took a knife and then assaulted the second person, and then put this serrated blade, I think, to his throat when other people interfered. So he's now been charged with attempted murder. He's going through the judicial process, and that should be the end of it. You have got one person attack another person who's been arrested by the police, put into state custody, and is now going through the judicial process. So the people in Belfast and further afield in the north of Ireland, and indeed in, I believe, Glasgow and Southampton, this has become a cause célèbre to coalesce the right, to get them out onto the street as an excuse to attack people of colour, to attack mosques, to attack people in their homes and in their places of work. So this is all over Western Europe. I believe a lot of it is financed and directed by invisible hands in the background. I could guess who they are, but without having evidence, I'm not really going to go down that rabbit hole. So what we had here is people claiming that we must get rid of immigrants because they are a danger to society, and that we must protect our women and children. Now, there were race riots in Ballymena last year around the same time, and 50% of the people who were charged in relation to those civil disobedience and riots and acts of violence brought before the courts had actually criminal convictions for attacks within their own family. So people who are claiming they want to protect women and children have already been convicted of beating up their own wives in their own homes, within their own community. And what we witnessed in Belfast was horrible. It was hideous. It was evil. Towards the Royal Victoria Hospital in West Belfast, we have a major roundabout, a thoroughfare. People come to and from the hospital and go from West Belfast to South Belfast. masked men conducted checkpoints on the various entrances towards the hospital, looking for foreigners, looking for people of colour. The police were in the vicinity but did not intervene. So we have the rise of the right. We have the fueling of division in order to keep the people in power in power. It's also a distraction from the real economic systemic failures of the state. We have the continuation of the rise of the right in the Ukraine. We have the continuation of the right, of the rise of the right in places like Poland and Hungary and other countries. We're actually descending into the pre-Second World War national fascism that was seen in Finland and other countries when they joined the SS. And we saw it in Czechoslovakia, we saw it in Finland, we saw it in different countries. And the rise of fascism is very much mirroring what happened just before the Second World War, and the rearming of Europe as a armed camp against Russia going forward is a complete mirror image of what was happening in 1933 to 1938 in Western Europe. Now, the thing you have to add in here is that we have our own colonial settler rump here in the north of Ireland. So Ireland was and still is occupied by the British. We had national wars of liberation, rebellions, insurrection for over 800 years. Ireland achieved partial independence and freedom in 1921 after a 3-year war of national liberation. But in the early 16th and 17th century, the north of Ireland was ethnically cleansed. The people who the indigenous Irish people by nationality and Catholic by their religion were forced to the west coast of Ireland. Their land was seized by the British Crown, and they brought Scottish workers and Scottish colonists into the north of Ireland, and their descendants still live here today, 400 years later. They don't see themselves as Irish. For 400 years, they have refused to integrate. We had a civil conflict that was based around, again, a national war of liberation by the Irish Republican Army between 1969 and 1998. Then we had a counter-revolutionary death squads from the Ulster Defence Association and the Ulster Volunteer Force, directed, armed and kept out of prison in many instances by the British security apparatus. So we have a divided society here. 1 million, I'm going to generalise, pro-Irish, pro-Catholic in the main. 1 million pro-Protestant, pro-British in the main. But part of that Protestant-British identity shows a hatred for the Catholic community and a total rejection of the reunification of Ireland. And every year they have the 12th of July bonfires, which celebrate the victory of Prince William of Orange, a Dutch prince, and King James of Scotland, a Scottish king, both who wanted to fight over the vacant crown in England. So they came to Ireland to fight. A Dutch prince, a Scottish king, fighting over who would become the King of England, came to Ireland in order to have their fight and embroil the Irish people in this conflagration. And what happened was Prince William of Orange won. The Catholics and King James were defeated. He left for France, and ever since there's been this rump of Protestant loyalism that hates Catholicism, that hates Irish Catholics, that hates the idea of national reunification on the island of Ireland, and they have these marches, parades and bonfires every year. And the fact is their biggest bonfires are on the 11th and 12th of July, which is like approximately 4 weeks now. So they're already invested emotionally in hatred and division and the other. And that's now also being directed towards the immigrant communities. So in these loyalist areas, these are the cheapest houses because there is an excess of housing, whereas in the nationalist areas, there's very little housing. So there's very little to rent and the prices are higher. So when people come to Belfast and the north of Ireland for a better life, fleeing war, fleeing destruction, fleeing death and torture at the hands of America, at the hands of Zionism, at the hands of NATO. Look at Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, Iran. You know, this is where the people who are being murdered live, and they only come here because it's the people in our societies that are responsible for the circumstances they find themselves in. So you have this loyalist rump. It's small, but it can get people out on the streets. And it does have a paramilitary component, and there are armed criminal gangs in the background. So they can get people out onto the street. So people are vulnerable because, as I say, immigrants come, they take houses wherever they can. They take houses that have the cheapest rent. I mean, my God, if I moved to Barcelona and I was looking for work, and I took the cheapest thing I could find for myself and my family, just to give us a step on the housing ladder, to give us security, to give us safety, and then try and build a life around it. And because they're in these areas in East Belfast, North Belfast, off the Shankill Road, West Belfast, they are vulnerable hostages to anything that happens. So I just want to reiterate that the two men that ended up in the altercation that's caused all this were known to each other. Drinks and drugs may have been involved. This isn't a case of some isolated someone with mental impairment who just walked down the street and decided to try and kill somebody. So the context is they probably knew each other, and that this isn't a case of just someone walking down the street where we're all vulnerable because we all walk down the street. All our children go to school. But the outworkings of this are that people have been burnt out of their homes, people's cars have been attacked, people's workplaces have been attacked, and people have been assaulted. And people of colour are hiding in their homes. They're frightened to let their children go to school, depending on what area they have. There was a case here where I live in Ardoyne, where someone living in Ardoyne started racially abusing a person of colour who also lives here. But this community has rallied round that individual and other families living here to reassure them that not only are they welcome, but that if necessary, we, the nationalist Republican community in Ardoyne, in North Belfast, will defend those people. So they don't have to leave, and they are not under threat. Whereas in loyalist areas, these people are under threat, they are in danger, they are frightened, and they are cowering in fear behind closed doors or behind closed curtains. So these isolated incidents of violence, and people are putting up, I think sadly there have been 30 women in the north of Ireland who may have been murdered this year in domestic violence. But we don't have thousands of people on the streets demanding an end to domestic violence. We have a senior member of the Democratic Unionist Party, ex-leader, I believe, Jeffrey Donaldson. He is in court being accused by his daughter of sexual misconduct when she was younger. No one is at his door. No one is burning his car. No one is threatening him in the street. So we have constant cases of white on white violence, of people committing domestic violence, of white people stabbing other white people, but it's not an issue until it's a person of colour who's involved, and then that's used as an excuse to bring thugs onto the street. And what we have are what I would consider to be senior members of paramilitary groups directing young people who are teenagers, 14 to 17, in acts of violence as what used to be euphemistically called the godfathers of violence. There are people from England who specifically came over to be involved in the violence and to record it for social influencing in the United Kingdom. They're saying, look at this, you don't mess with the people of Belfast. This is what real men do. This is what happens when communities come together to fight this Asian Islamic threat. So they're trying to whip up hysteria in their own country by using this as a template of what they should be doing. So it's a convergence, I believe, of Christian right, who are being financed by Zionism, a radical right, who are just fascist thugs, who are unhappy with society and what's happening. Perhaps they're unhappy in their lives and they want to lash out. And you throw in a sprinkling of politics, innuendo, lies, and Islamophobia, and all of a sudden, like, no one's attacking Jewish synagogues, and no one wants that to happen, but they are attacking Muslim churches and places of worship and mosques and people in the street. So part of it is moving the compass from Jewish people on to people of the Islamic faith. And I think this has been encouraged and paid for and directed by Zionism, which goes, no. We're not the threat. You know, your real enemy. It's like, look over there, don't look over here. Your real enemy are the Islamists who want to come and take over your country. And, you know, the very fact that the Zionists want to put 2 million people out of Gaza, like, where are they going to go if not into Europe? And if you listen to some of the Zionists, they say specifically this: we will destroy Europe, we will bring America to its knees, we will be the masters of the world. And they're going to do that by destroying the European Union, by destroying kind of, I want to say Christian values, but yeah, I'm just trying to think of the right way. They want people to fight. They want the Christians and they want Islamists to fight. They want end of times. They want to sit back and let everybody, watch everybody destroy and decimate each other, and then come in at the end and take over. And that's, I suppose people are maybe going to say conspiracy theory, he's an anti-Semite, you know, but 10 years ago, I never would have said what I just said. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said what I just said. But my journey as an anti-capitalist, as anti-colonialist, as anti-imperialist, and I include anti-Zionist, has brought me to the point where I'm simply repeating what I hear Zionists and Jewish supremacists saying in their own words, that I believe what they're saying, they believe what they're saying, and I think the rest of us should start believing what they're saying from the words, from their own mouths, not from someone who has an agenda and acts to grind a hidden political philosophy. I hear what they say, I see what they're doing. My conclusion is exactly their conclusion. They want to be in control going forward, and in order to do that, they must destroy everything that stands in their way.
Well, maybe this is a new series of programs that maybe where they are the thoughts of Fra Hughes in the road to Palestine, the road to save humanity, the road against barbarism, against supremacism. Thank you very much, and please make you the end of this first program.
No, I think that's good. And I think if we're going to do the thing with Iran, I would tie it in with the flotilla to say that what we did in the flotilla was our direct action standing with the people of Palestine, and what Iran does and Yemen and the people of Lebanon is exactly the same thing. You know, like, they're suffering and dying. We just got arrested and many people were beaten and assaulted, but you know, it's there's different layers and there's different capacities from different people. And that was our capacity to face those dangers. So it's a small microcosm of what people in Iran, people are doing.
Perfect, Fra. Thank you very much